Let's deal with air. This will be a longer video than some of them, with quite a bit of editing in it, because I want to try and cover most of the important air rules in some detail. This is an airbase. It's a level 3 airbase. You can have a level 1, 2 or 3 airbases. What does that mean? A level 1 airbase can hold 4 aircraft, a level 2 can hold 5, and a level 3 can hold 7, I think. It's 3 plus 4. So you add the airbase number to 4, and that's the number of aircraft you can hold. So it can hold more aircraft. This one here can hold fewer aircraft. Interestingly, in this game, you get to refit all aircraft at this base for free at the start of each turn. Normally you'd spend 1 supply token per aircraft. When an aircraft flies a mission, when it comes back and lands, it's going to go into the inactive box, and at the start of your following turn you can pay 1 token to refit each aircraft. That's basically the logistics of aircraft. Let's have a look at a fighter sweep mission. So a fighter sweep is essentially when you want to go and aggressively shoot down your opponent's fighters. So I've got this French fighter with an air-to-air combat rating of 3 and a barrage rating of 1 here. And maybe what I'd like to do is fly across the desert and shoot this sucker down. So there's a Commonwealth airbase here, and there's this Gladiator with an air-to-air combat rating of 2. That's a fighter, it's got an F in the corner, and so is this. So basically all I do is I pick up my fighter, fly it all the way over here, and drop it on that hex. And there's going to be an air combat in that hex. There's the air mission sequence. So we've declared our mission, we want to do a fighter sweep. We've moved our aircraft from the hex to its target. We now resolve air combat. You don't bother doing interception or flak steps if you're doing a fighter sweep. You do those for other missions. Okay, so we're now going to move on to air-to-air combat. One quick note, the terminology the game uses is an abort. Whenever a mission either ends or is stopped early, it's called an abort. So what we're basically going to do is the 2 planes are going to fight, and then one of them, or eventually both of them, will abort. So to make this a bit more interesting, I've actually added some extra aircraft in, and it'll help us learn the game a little bit better. So we've got 2 aircraft versus 2. And essentially the way aircraft combat works is each side, the attacker versus the defender, are going to pick 1 aircraft, and they're going to go head to head. The other ones can choose to abort at this stage, they can just fly off. But these 2 will fight out a round, and then one of them will abort, and then each side will throw in another aircraft, and they'll keep going until all of one side's aircraft have aborted, flown away basically, or been shot down. So these 2 are going to fight, because both sides choose to pick those. It's very simple, the attacker rolls 2 dice. That's an amazing roll. They add their attack combat factor, and they subtract their opponent's. So that's basically a net 1, so that's a 13. They check that on this chart here. 8 or more, the defender aborts. They then roll a 3rd die, and we see that there's no effect, so no planes get shot down. So this craft here has to abort, and it has to fly to an airbase. So it departs, and then this one will go in against this one. And the same procedure. 2 dice, 5, 6, 7, 8, minus 2 takes us down to 6. 6 or less, the attacker aborts. Roll to see if there's any effect. 1, no effect. That's essentially air combat. You might have a huge stack, but planes are going to fly in, you're going to roll off against each other, or roll off. and some might get shot down, and then planes as they abort will have to fly back to bases. Let's look at an air barrage. So we've got an aircraft here with a T on it. This is a bomber. It's got a barrage value of 8. So in my air barrage phase, it's going to fly out from here, and it's going to land. We'll bomb the Free French. I think that's a nice big stack. It's going to land on that stack and drop bombs there. Now, in this game, aircraft have unlimited range. Sometimes they have a number just about here above the wing, which states how far they're allowed to fly, and that's how far they're allowed to fly out and how far they're allowed to fly back. But that isn't the case in Reluctant Enemies. It is, however, nearish an enemy airfield, so I just need to check the rules and see if that is going to have an impact. Okay, this is an active fighter in an airbase. That means it exerts what's called a patrol zone, which is basically a 10 hex circle around this base. Anything which happens in 10 hexes, it can choose to intercept, which is fly out and shoot down. So we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So an interception can happen here. So I can move that into there and basically conduct an air combat. The procedure for interception is the same as air combat. This is the attacker, this is the defender. This plane's combat value is in parenthesis. That means that it can't launch attacks, but it can fight in defense. So the attacker rolls 2 dice, rolls 3, 4, 5, minus 1 is 4. We look that up. On the air combat table, and you'll see that 6 or less, the attacker aborts. And we'll roll to see if the attacker gets shot down. 3, no he doesn't. So he has to abort. He just flies straight back to this airstrip here, and he becomes inactive. So he would have to pay a supply token next turn if he wants to fly again. And our bomber can continue on with his tactical bombing mission on these Free French here. The next thing we need to do is determine flak. Any bombing mission is subject to flak. Some of the missions are too. So yeah, barrage, which is what we're doing, hip shoot, which is a type of barrage, and train busting are subject to flak. Essentially all you do in flak is you roll 2 dice, and if you roll an 11, you might get shot down. If you have 3 or more aircraft on the mission, that's +1 modifier. There's a bunch of other modifiers. We get +1 because we're in an aircraft patrol zone. But that's it. So if we roll a 10 or higher, we might get shot down, and then we'll have to roll on this table if we manage to roll a 10 or higher. Ooh, 9, which adds to 10, which is 1 short. So the flak has no effect and the mission continues. Now we can conduct our barrage, which is this plane barraging this hex here. There's 4.5 regiment equivalents in that hex. That matters. And essentially it's the same as an artillery barrage. We look at our total barrage strength, which in this case is 8, so we're in this column. We don't have to pay the supply cost. We then look at a few modifiers. There's one for density. We have greater than 4 and up to 5, so we move 2 to the right because there's 4.5 regimental equivalents in that hex. There's nothing for terrain. There is, however, no spotter. If I'd bombed the next hex over, there would be a spotter because there's a unit next to it. But for this hex, there's no spotter. I've got no units in the immediate vicinity, in the surrounding hexes. So we go from here, 1, 2, 3 across, and then I roll, and I'll either get a disorganized result or a disorganized with the 50% chance of causing a single casualty. 2 dice. 7. No result. My bomber then flies back to its airfield and it becomes inactive. It goes into the inactive box. And it would normally have to have a token spent to move it to the active box so it could fly a mission next turn. And that is an air barrage, not a particularly successful one, but one that followed the rules at any rate. Air transport and moving between bases. A move between bases is quite simple. You just take off and you fly to your next base. Transport's similar, except you have to have a transport aircraft. This is not, this is a tactical bomber. And it will have a number of transport points and it can carry tokens or troops when it makes its flight. There are rules for paradropping and glide drops as well, but I'm not going to go into those in detail. As of any other mission, once it's flown, the plane becomes inactive until the start of the next turn when you have to spend the token to make it active again in the refit phase. Train busting. What if you want to blow up a railway? Why would you want to do this? Why? Why would you want to kill a railway? Well, you can do what's called a barrage versus facility, which is where you drop. If you're successful, you can put a train busted marker on a train track. It increases the movement costs to move through this hex and the ones immediately around it, and if either side wants to move stuff down the railway, they'll have to spend an extra rail cap point to do so. So you essentially just fly out here and do barrage versus facility. Barrage versus facility is the same as a normal barrage. You're going to fly out, you're going to maybe get intercepted, you're going to roll flak, and then if you get to your target and you can bomb it, it's a similar kind of deal. You're going to pick your barrage strength. If you were artillery and not a plane, you'd maybe pay some tokens and then you're going to roll. Some of these results you'll see, this camera doesn't zoom very well, you'll see have asterisks on them. And if you achieve one of those results, that means the train bust is successful if you're trying to blow up railway track. The other results refer to damage to the facility as a whole. I will talk about airdrops actually, because I've had a read of the rules and they look interesting. You obviously need a transport aircraft, of which I don't think there are any in Reluctant Enemies. If they are, they're over in my reinforcement stack and I can't bother to dig them out. The first rule is you have to write down on a piece of paper where you want to make a drop, the hex, at least 2 turns before you're due to make it. So you have to pre-plan it. You can then later cancel it or postpone it by a turn. But you have to, you're committed. You're 2 turns earlier, you've got to write it down and you can't change it. You can only postpone it or cancel it. And then you do your normal procedure. You're going to fly out, check for flak, maybe get intercepted. And then essentially you're going to roll on this table to see what your drop survives. And it takes into account whether it's clear or closed terrain, whether it's a glider or an airdrop, and you're going to roll the die and it's either going to not go well or it is going to go well. You can't drop onto enemy controlled units, and you can only drop supply points or para units. And I don't believe there are any para units in Reluctant Enemies.